All right, today we are tackling a massive question. Who were the most powerful empires and nations in all of human history? We're going on a journey through time, watching the rise and fall of the giants who literally shaped the world we live in today. So let's just dive right in. So, if I asked you to name the most powerful empire ever, who would you pick? The Romans? The Mongols? Maybe the British? Well, as it turns out, the answer is way more complicated than you'd think. It's really a story about a constantly shifting center of gravity, almost like a relay race where the baton of dominance gets passed down through the centuries.
Okay, before we get going, we need to be clear on what we even mean by a great power, because it's not just about who had the most land. I mean, take ancient Athens, just a single city-state, but its cultural and naval influence was off the charts. And it's not always about longevity either. The Byzantine Empire lasted 1,000 years, but you have to admit that Nazi Germany, for its brief and terrible time, was a dominant power. So for our purposes, a great power is a state that can truly project its will and shape the world around it.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. We're going to travel through 6 major eras. We'll start at the dawn of civilization, then move through the classical and medieval worlds. After that, we'll see the age of global European empires, watch them collapse in the world wars, enter the Cold War, and finally, land right here in the power struggle of today.
So let's start our journey at the very beginning, with the first civilizations that managed to organize themselves into powerful states and project their influence far beyond their own borders.
You know, what's really amazing about this early period is that there wasn't just one big player on the world stage. Instead, the ancient world was what we call multipolar. You have these incredible, powerful civilizations rising all at the same time, all across the globe, from Egypt and Mesopotamia to the Americas and China. Each one was a center of power and innovation in its own right.
And these weren't just regional players, believe me. Ancient Egypt's stability made it a dominant force for an unbelievable 3,000 years. The empires in Mesopotamia, like Babylon, gave us fundamental tools like advanced math and written law. And those things are a form of power themselves, right? They allow for complex societies. The Persian Empire later came in and united that whole region into one massive superstate. And over in the East, Han Dynasty China was in a golden age, with a population of over 50 million people, all supported by some seriously advanced bureaucracy and technology.
So all of that really sets the stage for our next era, one that was defined by legendary empires whose legacies are absolutely still with us today, and by a monumental struggle for control of the known world.
In the Mediterranean, 2 titans emerged, Rome and Carthage. This was a classic matchup. Rome was the unstoppable land power, with its disciplined legions that had perfected the art of conquest. Carthage, on the other hand, was the master of the seas, a commercial empire built on a dominant navy and vast trade networks. Their conflict, the Punic Wars, was basically a century-long battle to see who would reign supreme.
And in the end, Rome won. With Carthage defeated, Rome became the undisputed superpower of its time, unifying the entire Mediterranean world under one rule. It was a power so immense that, in the end, it was brought down less by an external enemy and more by its own internal decay, political instability, economic problems, and just the sheer difficulty of trying to manage such a gigantic territory.
But the story didn't end there. As the Western Roman Empire collapsed, its eastern half, the Byzantine Empire, managed to survive for another 1,000 years. And this is a perfect example of how new powers always rise to fill a vacuum. The Islamic caliphates exploded out of Arabia. The Mongols, using revolutionary cavalry tactics, built the largest single land empire in history. And finally, the Ottoman Empire rose to become a superstate that dominated the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and Africa for 600 years. The baton just keeps getting passed.
Okay, now we arrive at a pivotal turning point in world history. This is the moment when a handful of nations on the western edge of Europe used new technologies to project their power across the entire planet. And that changed absolutely everything. The first truly global power was Spain. So how'd they do it? Well, it was a combination of smart politics, military might, and perfect timing. First, a series of strategic marriages handed the Spanish crown a huge piece of Europe. Then, they annexed their rival, the powerful Portuguese trading empire. Add to that the unimaginable wealth of silver and gold flowing from their new colonies in the Americas, and by the 16th century, Spain had created the first empire on which the sun truly never set.
But remember, power is a relay race. Spain's dominance eventually faded, partly because of all that silver causing inflation and because of costly European wars.
The baton was passed to a new trio. The British and the Dutch came up with new economic models and dominated the seas, while France became the dominant land power on the continent. For the next few centuries, this trio was pretty much calling the shots across the globe.
But that kind of intense competition couldn't last forever. In the modern era, centuries of rivalry finally just detonated. Industrialization changed the very nature of war and shattered the old world order for good.
This great unraveling happened in stages. The Napoleonic Wars first turned the continent upside down. Then a tense balance of power held for about a century, but it was really a house of cards. It all came crashing down in 1914 with the First World War. And this wasn't a war of horses and cannons, it was a war of machines and industry, which led directly to the even more destructive Second World War.
So here's the crucial point. The industrial scale of these wars didn't just cause immense human suffering, it literally bankrupted the great European empires. The cost of total war was simply too high. The era of European global dominance was over, and the center of power shifted to new players from outside the continent, primarily the United States.
With the old empires gone, the world was left with only two nations that had the economic and military might to be called superpowers, and this set the stage for a completely new kind of global conflict.
For the next 45 years, the world was defined by this rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. And this wasn't just a competition between countries, it was between two opposing ideologies, capitalism versus communism. They built their own military alliances, NATO and the Warsaw Pact, and competed for influence across the entire planet in a tense standoff we now call the Cold War.
The Cold War ended, and it ended abruptly in 1991. The Soviet Union, unable to keep up economically and facing all sorts of internal pressures, just collapsed. This left the United States in a position no nation had seen for centuries. It was the world's only superpower, the undisputed global leader. But as history has shown us time and time again, no one stays on top forever. And that brings us to our final section, the power dynamics of the 21st century.
This chart tells a staggering story. I mean, just a few decades ago, China's economy was a tiny fraction of America's. Today, it has gone through one of the most rapid economic expansions in human history, lifting hundreds of millions out of poverty and becoming the world's factory. Now, it's directly challenging American economic leadership.
And this highlights a crucial point. China's rise isn't something new, it's a return. For most of recorded history, China was a major center of global power and innovation, if not the major center. The sleeping giant, as Napoleon supposedly called it, has woken up and is re-emerging to reclaim what it sees as its historical position on the world stage.
Of course, it's not just a two-horse race. The world is becoming multipolar again, a lot like the ancient world where we started this journey. The European Union is still a massive economic bloc. Countries with huge populations and booming economies, like India, are poised to become major powers. And nations like the United Kingdom continue to have significant global influence.
Which brings us to our final question. The entire history we've just explored reveals one constant, unbreakable rule. Power always shifts. Empires rise, they dominate, and eventually they are replaced. So, as you look at the world today, who do you think will lead the next century? The great relay race of history continues.